You are not what I was promised." The words were spoken so quietly that only Lady Beatrice Locksley, the clergyman, and perhaps the nearest pair of witnesses could have heard them. Yet they struck with greater force than if Roland Marlowe, Duke of Brackenmere, had announced them to all of London. Beatrice stood beneath the pale stone arch of the Marlowe family chapel, one gloved hand resting lightly over the small bridal reticule at her waist. Beyond the carved screen, the selected guests waited in polished stillness. Silk whispered. Someone shifted a prayer book. No one yet understood that the marriage had stopped before it had begun. Beatrice looked up at the man she had been prepared to marry. The Duke of Brackenmere was taller than she remembered from their formal meetings, though perhaps the difference came from standing this close without a table, chaperone, or carefully arranged conversation between them. His expression was composed, severe, almost, but there was no contempt in it. That made the sentence worse. Her fingers tightened once around the reticule. Then she answered, "Neither are you." For the first time that morning, something changed in his face. Not anger, surprise. Reverend Thomas Bell lowered his gaze discreetly to the open prayer book. Beatrice heard her own breathing and was absurdly aware of the square of white linen folded inside her reticule, her mother's handkerchief, hand-hemmed, marked with a tiny blue cornflower and the initials BL. Her mother had once told her that composure was useful only if it did not become another name for silence. Beatrice had remembered that lesson through years of being useful at Locksley House. Useful daughters checked household accounts when their brothers found them tiresome. Useful sisters remembered which widowed aunt required a call. Useful unmarried ladies listened patiently, while married relations discussed their futures as if they were furniture awaiting placement. She had been useful enough to be offered to a duke. She had believed, however foolishly, that this offer was different. Roland's gaze sharpened. "What were you promised?" There was dry precision in the question. No soothing falsehood. No attempt to pretend he had not said what he had said. Beatrice preferred that to kindness she had not requested. A husband who considered a duchess capable of more than arranging flowers and dinners. One dark eyebrow lifted. She continued. A husband who wished his wife to understand the estates attached to her position. Schools, tenant families, charitable obligations, household accounts where appropriate. The Duke glanced toward the witnesses, then back to her. "I was told you wanted none of those things." For one suspended instant, Beatrice thought she had misheard. "What? I was informed that you desired a quiet domestic life and would prefer estate matters to remain entirely in my hands." "That is not true. I begin to suspect that." The answer was so dry that, under other circumstances, she might have laughed. She did not. "What else?" Roland's mouth tightened slightly. "That you regarded the arrangement favorably because you wanted security, and had no wish to be troubled by an active public role." Beatrice felt heat rise beneath the calm she had spent a lifetime learning to maintain. "I was told you had read my letters." "I read letters represented to me as yours." She stared at him. The chapel seemed suddenly too small. "And what did those letters say?" "That you found estate administration exhausting, even in theory. That you hoped marriage would relieve you of such responsibilities. That you had no particular interest in society beyond what duty required." Beatrice's humiliation altered shape. Until that moment, she had thought the Duke had found her disappointing. Now she understood that he had expected an entirely different woman. She drew a slow breath. "I wrote that I dislike society when it mistakes noise for usefulness." His eyes narrowed. "I was given a version without the qualification." A pulse began beating at Beatrice's temple. She opened her reticule. Inside lay the white linen handkerchief, and, beneath it, the letter she had carried, because she had thought she might need courage before the vows. Instead, she needed evidence. She drew out the folded cream sheet. Roland's gaze went to it immediately. This was sent to me 3 weeks ago. By whom? By you. I doubt that. Beatrice held his gaze. Then I suggest you read it. Both reached for the letter. Their gloved fingers touched. It was nothing. Barely contact at all. Yet both stopped. For the first time since he had spoken, Roland looked not like a duke examining a problem, but like a man abruptly aware of the woman standing inches from him. Beatrice withdrew first, not coyly, simply because someone had to. Roland took the letter. She watched his eyes move over the first lines. The change in him was immediate, not dramatic. Worse, his stillness became absolute. He read farther. Then again from the beginning. Reverend Bell looked up at last. Your Grace. Roland did not answer him. He turned the sheet slightly toward the chapel windows, where spring light passed thinly through the glass. Beatrice saw him studying the paper rather than the words. What is it? He raised his eyes to hers. You believe I wrote this. I believed you meant every word. A shadow crossed his expression. That was not my question. No, she said. It was not. Roland looked back at the letter. Then he said, with unmistakable certainty, I did not write it. Beatrice felt the floor beneath her feet, as if she had only just remembered it existed. Behind them, the guests remained respectfully ignorant. For another few seconds. Then Roland folded the letter once along its existing crease. Did you receive others? Yes. Signed with my name? Yes. How many? Enough to persuade me I understood the man I was about to marry. His jaw tightened. And I received enough to persuade me I understood the woman. Beatrice looked toward the altar. Candles burned steadily. White flowers had been arranged around the rails. Somewhere beyond the chapel door waited a breakfast, prepared to celebrate a union between two people who apparently had never been permitted to know one another. She almost laughed. It would have sounded too much like breaking. Instead, she said, What happens now? Roland studied her for a long moment. Then, with a care that surprised her, he asked, Do you wish this ceremony to continue? The chapel seemed to hold its breath. Beatrice could imagine every consequence of saying no. London would talk. Her brother would be furious. Relations, who had congratulated themselves upon securing her future, would suddenly remember every reason an unmarried woman of 30 ought to be grateful for any respectable match. The Duke himself could end the matter with one sentence and leave her to carry the disgrace. But he had asked. He had not commanded. Beatrice lifted her chin. No. Roland nodded once. No hesitation followed. He turned to Reverend Bell. There will be no vows today. A faint stir moved through the witnesses. Roland faced the gathered guests before anyone could whisper loudly enough to shape the story first. There has been a serious misunderstanding in the correspondence preceding this marriage, he said. Lady Beatrice bears no fault for the ceremony being halted until the matter is understood. Responsibility rests equally with both households. Beatrice looked at him. He did not glance her way for approval. He merely made the statement as if it were a fact he intended the room to accept. Then he turned back to her. The forged letter remained in his hand. May I keep this for examination? Beatrice looked at the paper, then at him. Yes, the transfer mattered. She was strangely certain of that. He inclined his head. Thank you. Beatrice reached into her reticule, touched the folded linen handkerchief once, and left it where it was. She would not need it to hide her face. Not today. She walked from the altar under her own power. Behind her, before the first real wave of whispers began, the Duke of Brackenmere held the false letter toward the chapel light once more. Near the lower edge of the cream paper, faint but unmistakable, was the watermark of a small bell, and Roland knew he had never ordered paper bearing that mark. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the wedding flowers had begun to wilt in a chapel no one wished to enter. Roland stood in his study at Brackenmere House with the forged letter laid flat upon his desk. He had resisted the urge to tear it in half. Destruction would have been satisfying for perhaps 3 seconds and useful for none. Across from him, Hugh Fenner opened the outgoing correspondence register and adjusted his spectacles. Lady Alice Marlowe stood beside the window, still wearing the pale grey gown she had chosen for her brother's wedding. She had removed her gloves. That small concession to disorder was the only visible sign that the morning had not gone according to plan. "You are certain Lady Beatrice received this 3 weeks ago?" Hugh asked. "She said so, and you did not dictate it?" "No." "Nor ask me to send anything resembling it?" "No." Alice glanced at her brother. "You sound offended by the handwriting." "I am offended by several things. The handwriting has merely joined them." Her mouth twitched. Hugh, who had served Roland long enough not to be distracted by ducal irritation, turned several pages. There is no entry corresponding to the date she gave. Roland already knew there would not be. Still, seeing the blank space produced a different kind of anger. Check the fortnight before it. Hugh did. Nothing. Roland picked up the false letter by its edges. The small bell watermark showed only when the page was angled toward the light. "Do we use this stock anywhere in the house? Not for your private correspondence." "That was not my question." Hugh considered. "I would need to ask the housekeeper and inspect the stationery cupboards." "Do so." Quietly, Alice folded her arms. "And what do you intend to do about Lady Beatrice?" Roland looked at her. "The question suggests I intend to do something to her. You know perfectly well what I mean. I intend to discover who arranged for a woman to stand at my altar, believing I had written words I never wrote." Alice's expression softened. "And after that?" Roland looked down at the letter again. He remembered Beatrice's face when he had asked whether she wished the ceremony to continue. She had not hesitated long enough to pretend for his comfort. No decisions concerning Lady Beatrice will be made without Lady Beatrice. Alice nodded once. "That," she said, "is at least an improvement upon this morning." Roland gave her a flat look. Hugh coughed into his hand. "Something amusing, Fenner?" "Nothing at all, Your Grace." "Excellent. Preserve the habit." Hugh returned to the register. A few minutes later, his finger stopped. "There is something." Roland moved around the desk. 6 weeks ago. "A letter to Lady Beatrice Locksley, entered in your hand, dispatched through the household post." Roland read the line. He remembered writing it. Not the exact wording, but the purpose. He had been increasingly dissatisfied with the arrangement as it was being managed. Every answer he received from Beatrice had seemed polite, accommodating, and curiously empty of the intelligence he had been told she possessed. He had asked for something more direct. Was there a reply? Hugh turned the page. No. Roland felt the first true chill of the day. Alice saw it. "What did you write?" "I asked her questions. What sort? The sort one ought to ask before marrying a stranger." Alice stared at him. Roland frowned. "Do not look so astonished. I am reconsidering several childhood judgments. Keep them to yourself." But he was no longer listening. If Beatrice had never received that letter, then the deception was not a single forgery made to push an uncertain bride toward the altar. Someone had been controlling the exchange in both directions, and had done so for weeks. The next afternoon, Beatrice received the Duke of Brackenmere in the front drawing-room at Locksley House. Her brother had objected to the call. Her aunt had objected more loudly. Beatrice had listened to both, and then informed them that if everyone else intended to discuss her failed wedding, she saw no reason she should be excluded from the only conversation that might explain it. That had ended the argument. Lady Alice accompanied Roland, which satisfied propriety and irritated Beatrice's aunt, who had plainly hoped the Duke would arrive alone and repent dramatically. He did neither. He bowed. Beatrice curtsied. For one awkward second, they regarded each other as two people who had nearly been married less than 30 hours earlier and now had no socially convenient name for what stood between them. Roland broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." Beatrice had expected questions. This she had not expected. For stopping the wedding, for the sentence I spoke before it stopped. She held still. Roland continued. It made you sound like an item delivered against specification. Despite herself, Beatrice blinked. That is a remarkably accurate description of how it felt. I suspected as much after I heard myself say it. Only after? A faint dryness entered his eyes. I am accustomed to improving with evidence. Beatrice nearly smiled. Nearly. Then your apology is better than your first attempt at courtship. Lady Alice looked down quickly, though not before Beatrice saw amusement. Roland accepted the blow without defense. That is not a demanding standard. Something loosened in the room. Not trust. Not yet. But perhaps the absence of hostility. Roland waited until Beatrice indicated the chair opposite hers before sitting. He did not produce the forged letter. That surprised her too. Instead he said, I have it secured in my study. You gave it to me for examination. It has not left my possession. Beatrice had not realized she needed to hear that until he said it. Thank you. Hugh found no record that I sent it. So that confirms what you already knew. Yes, but he found something else. Roland removed a small notebook from his coat, not a letter. There is a record of a genuine letter I sent you 6 weeks ago. Beatrice frowned. I received nothing from you 6 weeks ago. So I feared. What did it say? I would rather not reconstruct it badly if the original still exists. That answer earned him another look. He noticed. You disapprove? No. I am merely becoming accustomed to a man who does not improve every silence by filling it. That may be the finest compliment I receive this season. This time she did smile. Briefly, Roland's expression changed, almost imperceptibly, as if he had not expected the sight. Beatrice looked away first, and reached for a small bundle of correspondence tied in ivory ribbon. These are the letters I received under your name. He did not touch them. May I? The question was simple. Its effect was not. Beatrice untied the ribbon and selected 2. Only these for now. Roland nodded. He read the first in silence, then the second. His mouth hardened. What? This phrase. He pointed without moving the page toward himself. Beatrice leaned enough to see. A duchess should be happiest when relieved of unnecessary responsibilities. She read. I was told that was your view. It is almost the opposite of something I wrote. Roland looked at her. Beatrice searched her memory. In one of my letters, I said rank without responsibility seemed an unnecessary burden. He sat back slowly, and I received a version in which you appeared grateful to avoid responsibility. Beatrice felt the pieces shift. Not enough to form an answer. Enough to form intent. They used my own words, parts of them, to make the lies sound like me. Yes. Beatrice looked at the bundle between them. Then whoever did this did not merely write false letters. No, they had my real ones. Roland's gaze held hers. And mine. The room became quiet. Lady Alice no longer pretended not to listen. Beatrice reached for a sheet of plain paper from the writing table. What are you doing? Making a list. Of what? Every letter I remember sending. Approximate date. Subject. Anything quoted back to me later. Roland watched her dip the pen. You remember them? Most. Convenient. It often is. A corner of his mouth moved. Then he took out his own notebook. Very well, I will do the same. Beatrice looked at him, not for permission, for recognition. For the first time since this had begun, the mystery did not seem like something being done around her by men with titles, registers, and locked desks. She was inside the search, exactly where she intended to remain. After several minutes, Roland stopped writing. One of mine is missing. Beatrice's pen paused. The one from 6 weeks ago. Yes, you are certain it was sent. It is entered in the outgoing register, and I am certain I never received it. Roland closed the notebook. The dry humor had left his face. If that letter can be found, Lady Beatrice, it may tell us when this began. Beatrice looked at the 2 false letters on the table. No, she said quietly. It may tell us who was afraid of what we would say. if we ever spoke to each other directly. Roland met her eyes. Neither of them smiled then. The next morning, Lady Beatrice Locksley returned to Brackenmere House by the same front steps she had descended as an unmarried bride 2 days before. No flowers remained. That helped. Lady Alice met her in the morning room rather than the chapel corridor, and Beatrice was grateful for the choice. The room held ledgers, correspondence boxes, and a broad table near the windows. Nothing in it suggested vows, congratulations, or failure. Roland stood at the far end with Hugh Fenner. "You came," he said. Beatrice removed her gloves. "You invited me." "Yes." His tone was dry enough that she glanced at him. He added, "I am discovering that those two facts need not naturally follow one another." Alice made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Beatrice set her reticule beside her chair. "Then consider today educational." Roland's mouth shifted. It was becoming dangerously easy to recognize when he was amused. Hugh opened a correspondence box. "We have compared the dates you both reconstructed yesterday. There is a pattern." Beatrice moved closer. Roland indicated 2 lists lying side by side. Her own memory had produced dates, subjects, and occasional phrases. His household register supplied dispatch dates for letters he had actually sent. Several did not match what either had received, but what caught Beatrice's attention was not the absence. It was the precision. "One of my letters mentioned the school roof at Locksley," she said. "I wrote that I would rather understand why repairs had been delayed than merely be told they were expensive." Roland nodded. "The version I received said you disliked being troubled with expenditure." She looked at him. "That is almost artful. I hesitate to compliment the criminal." "Manipulator," Hugh corrected mildly. "We have not established a criminal offense, Your Grace." Roland looked at him. "Thank you for rescuing my vocabulary." Hugh appeared entirely untroubled. Beatrice examined another pair of entries. The alterations were always small. A qualification removed, a sentence shortened, a preference turned into a certainty. Roland had been told she wanted to be spared responsibility. Beatrice had been told he admired a woman who would participate actively in estate life. "They did not invent us from nothing," she said. "No," Roland replied. "They selected whatever made each of us more agreeable to the arrangement." She looked at him. "What made me agreeable to you?" The question escaped before etiquette could soften it. Alice became very interested in the window. Roland did not answer immediately. Beatrice almost regretted asking. Then he said, "Competence." She blinked. "That sounds alarmingly like praise from an estate report." "It improves upon obedient." "Marginally." His gaze warmed. "I was told you were sensible, undemanding, and unlikely to create unnecessary social obligations. And this appealed to you?" "Profoundly." Beatrice stared at him. Then, despite everything, she laughed. It was not elegant. It was brief and surprised and entirely genuine. Roland looked startled for half a second. Then he laughed too, not loudly, but enough to change him. For a moment, the Duke of Brackenmere vanished beneath the title, leaving a man who had apparently believed he could construct a peaceful marriage by selecting a woman who required nothing. Beatrice shook her head. "I was told you wanted a duchess who understood responsibility." "I did." "That was true." "Yes. Then why were you also searching for one who would never inconvenience you?" Roland considered. "Because I am capable of holding 2 incompatible ideas when they flatter me equally." Alice turned from the window. At last, progress. Roland gave his sister a level glance. A knock interrupted them. A footman entered, followed by a young housemaid. Beatrice had seen only once before. The girl could not have been more than 17. Her face was white. "Your Grace," the footman said. "Mrs. Weller sent Lucy up. A packet is missing from the west correspondence cupboard." The maid clasped her hands tightly. "I never took it, Your Grace." Roland's expression changed at once. Not softer, more attentive. "Who said you did?" "No one exactly, sir, Your Grace. Only Mrs. Weller asked who had dusted the room yesterday, and I had. The footman added, "The cupboard was found open after breakfast." Hugh frowned. "Which packet?" "Wedding correspondence, sir." Beatrice looked at the maid. "You dusted the room?" "Yes, my lady." "Did you open the cupboard?" "No, my lady. I haven't the key." That answer stopped Beatrice. She turned to Hugh. "Who does?" "The housekeeper, His Grace. Myself, for administrative access." Hugh paused. "Lady Alice has had one when necessary." Alice nodded. Beatrice looked back at Lucy. Then how was she expected to steal something from a locked cupboard she could not open? The footman shifted. "No one said steal, my lady. No, you merely brought a frightened girl before a duke because something disappeared from a place she could not access." Roland's gaze moved from Beatrice to the maid. "Lucy." "Yes, Your Grace, you are not accused of anything." The girl swallowed. "No wages are to be stopped," he continued. "You are not to be dismissed or questioned further unless someone first establishes that you could have reached the packet." Relief made her knees visibly weaken. "Thank you, Your Grace." Roland nodded to the footman. "Tell Mrs. Weller the same." When they had gone, Beatrice returned her attention to Hugh. "The cupboard." "Yes. Who else had authorized access during the wedding arrangements?" Hugh did not answer immediately. He crossed to a narrow cabinet, removed a household permissions book, and turned several pages. Roland came beside him. Beatrice remained where she was. Hugh found the entry. His expression sharpened. "Lady Winifred." Alice's face changed. "For what purpose?" "Supervision of invitation lists, responses, special license correspondence, and household arrangements connected to the marriage." Roland took the book. The authorization had begun almost 2 months earlier. Beatrice felt the shape of the mystery tighten. Lady Winifred had not merely known about the correspondence. She had possessed legitimate access to the rooms through which it passed. Roland looked at Beatrice. Access is not proof, no. But it is no longer coincidence. No, the amusement of minutes before had vanished. In its place was something more dangerous. Direction. Later, Alice remained in the adjoining sitting area while Beatrice and Roland sorted the final small bundle of her retained letters. Neither mentioned Lady Winifred. Not yet. There was nothing to gain from accusation without proof. Beatrice unfolded one page and felt the edge catch her finger. She drew in a sharp breath. Roland looked up. What happened? Nothing. A small red line appeared along the side of her forefinger. That appears to be an ambitious definition of nothing. It is paper. Paper has defeated governments. Beatrice looked at him. Has it defeated many dukes, only badly prepared ones? She reached for her reticule with her uninjured hand, but Roland was closer. He extended his hand toward hers, palm upward. "May I?" The question held her still. Not because the injury mattered, because he had asked. Beatrice placed her hand in his. His touch was careful, steadying rather than enclosing. She used her free hand to draw out her mother's linen handkerchief and wrapped one corner around the tiny cut. Roland's fingers remained beneath hers only as long as needed. Then he released her. No lingering claim, no attempt to turn the gesture into something it was not. Still, Beatrice felt the warmth of his hand after it was gone. Roland glanced at the small blue cornflower embroidered near the handkerchief's edge. "Your initials?" "My mother's work." He looked as if he might ask more. He did not. That restraint touched her almost as much as his hand had. Hugh entered before either could speak. "I found something." Roland straightened. "What?" "A portfolio Lady Winifred removed from the correspondence room after the ceremony was stopped." Beatrice's heartbeat quickened. "Where is it?" "Returned this morning." Hugh held Roland's gaze to the wrong cupboard. Hugh Fenner placed the portfolio on the broad table as carefully as if it contained something breakable. It was bound in dark green leather, the corners worn smooth by use. Nothing about it suggested importance. No ducal crest, no ribbon, no lock. Roland did not touch it at once. "Who returned it?" One of Lady Winifred's servants, Hugh said. The footman who received it assumed it belonged with household invitations. He put it in the west cupboard. Alice came nearer from the adjoining sitting area. Did the servant say why it had been taken? No. Beatrice looked at the portfolio. Does Lady Winifred know it was returned to the wrong cupboard? Hugh shook his head. Not that I am aware. Roland glanced at Beatrice. Then we have an advantage. A temporary one. You sound almost cheerful. I am trying not to frighten the furniture. That earned the faintest curve of her mouth. Roland opened the portfolio. Most of its contents were exactly what Hugh had expected. Invitation lists, replies from houses unable to attend the wedding, notes concerning flowers, seating, the wedding breakfast, and carriage arrangements. The remains of a celebration that had never happened. Beatrice stood beside the table while Hugh sorted the pages into small piles. Then Alice said, "That is not an invitation." Roland followed her gaze. Near the back of the portfolio, half hidden beneath a folded list of breakfast guests, lay a sealed letter. The direction was unmistakable. Lady Beatrice, Locksley House. Beatrice stopped breathing for one beat. Roland did not reach for it. Instead, he looked at her. "That is my hand." She stared at the letter. The seal was intact, not opened and resealed badly, not tampered with, intact. Hugh stepped back from the table. This must be the missing letter entered in the outgoing register. Roland's expression hardened. "I believe so." Beatrice felt something colder than anger move through her. Someone had intercepted a letter from him and preserved it unopened. Not because its contents were dangerous in themselves, because the simple fact of direct communication was dangerous. Roland pushed the letter gently toward her. "It is yours." Beatrice looked at him. "You do not wish to open it yourself?" "No, you wrote it. I sent it to you." That distinction settled something in her. She picked up the letter. The seal broke beneath her thumb. No one spoke while she unfolded the sheet. Roland turned slightly away, as if to give her privacy, despite standing only a few feet from her. Beatrice read, "My lady, I have begun to suspect that our correspondence contains more agreement than understanding, and I find the prospect unsettling." Her eyes moved faster. He had written with characteristic precision, but there was more uncertainty in the letter than she had expected. He asked whether she truly preferred to remain uninvolved in estate business. He asked whether she would wish to continue charitable work after marriage. He asked what degree of independence she expected within the household. He asked whether she feared anything about the arrangement. And then, near the end, "I would rather endure an inconvenient answer now than discover after marriage that either of us agreed to a life the other never intended to offer." Beatrice read that line twice. Then, once more. Roland had not moved. Her throat tightened, though she refused to look down. "You tried?" He turned back. "Yes." "Why?" The question came more sharply than she intended. Roland accepted it, because the letters attributed to you made less sense the more I received. "You thought I was lying?" "No, I thought someone was simplifying you." Beatrice looked at him. That answer landed differently. Not flattering, not romantic, but precise enough to hurt. "I would have answered this." Roland's face changed. "I know." "No, you do not." He went still. Beatrice held the letter between them. "I would have answered every question. I would have told you I wanted to understand the estates attached to my position. I would have told you I did not fear responsibility. I feared being ornamental." Alice lowered her eyes. Beatrice continued, "I would have told you I could endure a marriage without grand passion better than one without respect." Roland looked at her for a long moment, and I would have listened. She believed him. That was the cruelest part. For days they had been asking who had lied. Now she understood what the lie had stolen. Not merely a wedding. A chance to speak before the wedding ever became inevitable. Roland looked down at the opened letter. "If you had received that, would you still have gone to the altar?" Beatrice considered the question honestly. Perhaps, His gaze sharpened. "But not as strangers," she said. "Not as people agreeing to versions of each other prepared by someone else." The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt full of everything that had almost happened differently. Hugh cleared his throat gently. There is something else. He had placed the forged altar letter beside one of Lady Winifred's stationery invoices. The false letter lay face down, the small bell watermark visible against the window light. Hugh tapped the invoice. "Bell marked creamstock. Ordered 6 weeks ago." Roland read the line. "For whom?" Hugh hesitated. "Lady Winifred's private writing room." Alice's head came up. Beatrice looked from the invoice to the false letter. The clue was powerful enough to disturb. Not enough to convict. Roland said exactly that. "Access to the paper does not prove she wrote this." "No," Beatrice said. "But she had the paper," Alice replied quietly. "And she had the missing correspondence portfolio," Hugh added. Roland's jaw tightened. Beatrice folded the genuine letter along its original crease. "What do we know?" Roland looked at her. "Not what we suspect. What we know." He understood immediately. "That I wrote this letter, and I never received it." Hugh's register confirms dispatch. The letter was found among materials Lady Winifred removed from the correspondence rooms. Yes, the forged letter uses paper ordered for her private writing room. Yes. Beatrice looked at him steadily. "That is enough to ask questions, not enough to accuse." "Then do not accuse." Roland's eyes held hers. Something passed between them then. Not affection, not yet. Partnership, a recognition that both of them had nearly been bound for life, because someone else had decided direct conversation was too dangerous. Roland glanced toward Hugh. "Say nothing outside this room." Hugh nodded. Alice did the same. Beatrice slipped the genuine letter back into its envelope. Roland looked at it. "You should keep that." "I intend to." His mouth moved slightly. "I am relieved to discover at least one of my letters has improved with delivery." Beatrice looked at him. "It was 6 weeks late. I did not claim efficiency." She almost smiled. Then the door opened. Lady Winifred Marlowe stood on the threshold. Her gaze moved first to Roland, then to Beatrice, then to the broken seal in Beatrice's hand. For the first time since the cancelled wedding, Lady Winifred looked unprepared. Only for a second. Then the expression vanished. Beatrice saw it anyway. By the following afternoon, London had acquired a new version of the story. Lady Beatrice Locksley was no longer merely the bride whose ducal wedding had been stopped. She was the woman's said to have forged a duke's affection. By the next morning, the story had acquired details no one in Brackenmere House had supplied. That was how Beatrice knew the attack had been prepared. At Lady Marchwood's morning call, no one accused her directly. Direct accusation would have required courage, for instead, women who had once praised the proposed match now offered condolences with careful eyes. A gentleman who had previously spoken to her only through her brother bowed too deeply and asked whether she found literary misunderstandings difficult to survive. On a side table lay a folded copy of a note. Beatrice recognized 2 sentences at once. They were supposed to be hers. The rest was not. Lady Marchwood noticed her looking. "I had hoped you would not see it." Then, placing it beside the tea service was unfortunate. The woman colored. Across the room, someone looked way too slowly. Beatrice picked up the copy. It claimed that she had always understood the Duke's admiration to be personal rather than merely practical. Worse, it suggested, she had embellished his interest before the engagement was formally settled. A social climber. A woman who had mistaken courtesy for love. A woman who, once disappointed, might forge proof that a duke had encouraged her. The cruelty of it was not in its extravagance. It was in how neatly it fit what society preferred to believe about an unmarried woman of 30 who had nearly become a duchess. Beatrice folded the note again. "Who sent this?" Lady Marchwood hesitated. "It has been circulating." "That was not my question." A small silence gathered. Beatrice did not raise her voice. Does anyone here possess the original? No answer. Does anyone know who wrote this copy? Again. Nothing. She placed it back on the table. Then perhaps a page without provenance should carry less authority than a woman standing in the room. Lady Marchwood looked uncomfortable. Beatrice preferred discomfort to pity. A stir near the doorway interrupted the moment. Roland had arrived with Lady Alice. His gaze went first to Beatrice, then to the folded note on the table, then to the expressions around the room. He understood enough. Lady Marchwood hurried toward him. Your Grace, I am distressed that something so unpleasant should have reached my house. I am distressed that it reached any house. His tone was mild. That made the room quieter. One gentleman cleared his throat. Surely, Brackenmere, you can settle whether the lady's claims are accurate. Roland looked at him. I can settle one matter immediately. The gentleman waited. The paper being circulated did not come from me, my secretary, or any authorized member of my household. A pause. Roland continued. Whatever else you choose to repeat, you will not represent it as ducal testimony. He did not say Beatrice was innocent because he trusted her. He did something more useful. He removed his name from the weapon. Beatrice felt the distinction. So did the room. The gentleman bowed stiffly. Roland did not remain to dominate the conversation afterward. He exchanged the necessary civilities, then allowed Alice to draw him away. Beatrice stayed another 10 minutes. Leaving immediately would have looked like flight. Staying forever would have been theatre. 10 minutes was enough. That afternoon, she sat across from Roland in the library at Brackenmere House while rain tapped lightly against the windows. The forged altar letter remained locked in his study. The genuine letter he had truly sent rested in Beatrice's reticule, where it had remained since she carried it home the previous day. No evidence had moved without being accounted for. That mattered more now. Roland stood at the desk, reading a copy of the circulating accusation Hugh had obtained. I dislike this, he said. Beatrice sat back. What an astonishing development. His eyes lifted. I am trying to be serious. So am I. He set the paper down. They used the same method again. Something plausible surrounded by something false. Which means they expected repetition to make it believable. Yes. He moved to the chair opposite her. I should have anticipated that. Why? Because the moment we found the genuine letter, concealment became dangerous to whoever managed the correspondence. Attack was the obvious next step. Beatrice studied him. You speak as though you have failed an examination. I dislike being surprised. That I believe. He leaned back. There are many things you seem increasingly willing to believe about me, most of them supported by evidence. A flicker of humor came and went. Then he grew quiet. Beatrice waited. For once, Roland did not fill the silence with strategy. Finally, he said, there is something you should understand about why I agreed to this marriage in the first place. She did not answer immediately. Because it was convenient, that was the respectable explanation. And the true one? Roland looked toward the window. I thought affection made people easy to manipulate. Beatrice said nothing, he continued. My father admired devotion when it was useful to him. My mother learned to disguise disappointment as agreement. I decided very young that I would not build my household around emotional uncertainty. So you chose an arranged marriage, yes, to avoid being manipulated. Yes. Beatrice looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, it did not work. Roland laughed once under his breath. No, emotional distance did not protect you. No, it merely meant someone else could control the conversation. His gaze returned to hers. That is an uncomfortably exact description. I have a talent for them, I had noticed. There was no defensiveness in him. That changed the shape of the conversation. He looked down at his hands. I thought clarity could be created by keeping feeling out of the matter. And now I think clarity requires people to speak for themselves. Beatrice's chest tightened. He went on, more quietly, and I find that I care rather more than I expected about what you think when I do. That was not a declaration. It was better for being smaller, more dangerous, more honest. Beatrice looked at his hand, resting on the table between them. Then she reached across. Roland went still. She turned his hand palm up. He let her. Her fingers settled into his. No one spoke. The contact was warmer than she expected. Steadier, too. He did not tighten his grip immediately. He waited. Beatrice closed her fingers around his. Only then did Roland answer the gesture. They remained like that across the table, neither pretending the touch was accidental. After a moment, Roland said, "This seems inconsistent with your habit of correcting me. I can do both. That is deeply alarming." She smiled. When she finally released his hand, he reached for the copied accusation again. A smear of fresh ink from a notation Hugh had made marked his fingers. Beatrice noticed. "You have ink on your hand?" Roland looked down. "So I do." He reached for a blotting cloth, but she stopped him. "Wait." From her reticule, Beatrice drew her mother's linen handkerchief. The tiny blue cornflower rested near one corner. Roland recognized it. "This is the one you used yesterday." "Yes, I should not take it. I did not ask whether you should." His eyes lifted to hers. Beatrice held it out. For the ink, he accepted it carefully. The gesture was almost absurdly small, yet she felt more exposed. Lending him that square of linen than she had when standing before half of London's gossip, Roland cleaned the ink from his fingers. "I will return it. I assumed you would." A knock sounded. Hugh entered. His face told them before he spoke that the investigation had moved again. "Your Grace, Lady Winifred has agreed to speak with you." Roland rose. Beatrice did not. "Did she admit anything?" "Not forgery," Hugh said. "But she says she has been forced to manage incompatibilities for months." Beatrice's expression hardened. Roland's did the same. "Her phrase?" "Exactly." Hugh paused. "She also insists that a packet of correspondence remains missing." Roland glanced at Beatrice. "What packet?" Lady Winifred would not say. The room seemed to narrow. Beatrice looked at the handkerchief still in Roland's hand, then at Hugh. "If she believes something is missing," she said, "then something may still exist that she cannot afford for us to find." Roland folded the linen carefully over his fingers. This time, neither of them mistook suspicion for proof. But both understood the same thing. The lies had not ended at the altar. Roland made the mistake before breakfast. By 9 o'clock, Hugh Fenner had been instructed to secure every official correspondence cupboard connected with the Brackenmere household, including the records used during the wedding arrangements. By 9:30, Lady Winifred knew why. That was the mistake. Roland stood in her morning room while she watched him with a composure so complete that it bordered on insolence. "You have searched my papers?" she asked. "No, yet no." Her brows lifted. "I have ordered household correspondence records secured," he said. "Those belonging to Brackenmere House, not your private possessions." Winifred sat very straight beside the fire. "And what crime have my poor invitations committed?" "This is not about invitations." I had gathered that. Roland disliked the satisfaction in her voice. He should have said nothing until the records were under Hugh's control. Instead, anger had made him precise in the wrong direction. "We know letters were intercepted." Winifred's eyes sharpened. Only briefly. Roland saw it. He continued anyway. "We know at least one genuine letter I sent to Lady Beatrice was removed before delivery. We know false correspondence passed through the same household channels, and naturally you have decided I am responsible. I have decided access must be restricted until we know who is responsible." How admirably impartial. "Winifred." She smiled without warmth. "You have been Duke of Brackenmere for years, Roland. You should know by now that commanding a thing to be impartial does not make it so." He turned toward the door. "You will no longer supervise household correspondence." The smile disappeared. "And who persuaded you of this?" No answer was necessary. That was another mistake. Winifred saw the silence and supplied the name herself. Lady Beatrice. Roland turned back. Lady Beatrice did not ask me to do this. No, Winifred said. I expect she merely created the atmosphere in which you found it necessary. His voice cooled. Choose your next words carefully. Why? You have already chosen everyone's position for them. The sentence followed him into the corridor. By the time Hugh reached the west writing room, one of Lady Winifred's personal servants had already carried a small leather packet upstairs. The servant had every right to do so. The packet belonged to Winifred personally. That did not make Roland feel less foolish. At noon, Hugh stood before the study desk. We secured the household cupboards, Your Grace, and the packet, personal property, removed from Lady Winifred's writing case before the restrictions were put in place. Did anyone see what it contained? No. Roland looked at the forged altar letter resting inside the locked drawer. He had preserved the evidence, then warned the one person most likely to destroy the rest. There was no wit available for that. Only fact. Beatrice learned of it before Roland could call upon her. That, too, was Winifred's doing. By early afternoon, a new version had begun circulating through drawing rooms between Grosvenor Square and St. James's. Lady Beatrice Locksley, it was whispered, had so turned the Duke of Brackenmere against his own aunt that he had ordered her rooms searched. The story was false in nearly every detail, which made it perfectly suited to London. When Roland arrived at Locksley House with Lady Alice, Beatrice received him in the smaller drawing room. She did not ask him to sit. Alice took one look at Beatrice's expression and remained near the window. Roland began without preamble. I made an error. Yes. There was no need to ask which one. I confronted Winifred before Hugh secured the household records. Yes. She removed a personal packet. Yes. Roland studied her. You have already been told a surprising amount. I have been told that I persuaded you to search your aunt's bedchamber. His jaw tightened. I did no such thing. I know. That stopped him. Beatrice folded her hands before her. That is not why I am angry. Roland waited. She appreciated that he did not say he was listening. He simply did. You decided what should happen next without speaking to me. I believed the evidence was in immediate danger. It may have been. I thought speed mattered. It did. He frowned. Beatrice's voice remained level. You are expecting me to say you were wrong to investigate. Yes. I am saying you were wrong to decide that the investigation concerned only your authority. His expression changed, she continued. My name is attached to every rumor this produces. My letters were intercepted. My supposed intentions were rewritten. Yet when you believed the evidence was threatened, you acted first, and intended to tell me later. Roland opened his mouth, stopped. Beatrice saw the argument form and die. Good, he said. You are right. She had prepared herself to defeat a defense. His surrender unsettled her more. I should have consulted you. Yes. I gave Winifred warning. Yes. And in doing so, I may have weakened the evidence. Yes. A trace of irritation touched his face. You are taking unusual pleasure in that word. I have been denied it often enough. For one instant, something almost like humor passed between them. Then it was gone. Roland's voice lowered. I am sorry. No explanation followed. No mention of good intentions. No reminder that he had meant to protect her. Beatrice felt some of her anger shift, though it did not vanish. Thank you, Roland nodded. What do you intend to do? The question mattered. She could hear that he knew it mattered. Beatrice moved toward the writing table. Remain in London. Alice turned from the window. Roland's gaze sharpened. You expected me to suggest you leave? I expected half my family to suggest it. They already have. And you refused? Yes. Beatrice looked directly at him. I have been removed from enough rooms by other people's decisions. If I leave now, absence will become confession before supper. Roland said nothing. She pulled a sheet of paper toward her. Lady Winifred may control what remains in Brackenmere House. She does not control the people who sold her what she used. Hugh had told her enough about the bell-marked paper for the idea to take shape. The stationer, Roland said. Yes, if the paper was specially ordered. There will be an account, possibly a delivery record, and perhaps information about how it was cut or folded. Roland looked at her. Folded, Beatrice nodded. One of the earliest letters I received under your name had an odd inner fold. I thought it careless at the time. The papers were slightly too wide for the envelope. If the stock was cut to a particular size, we may be able to connect it to a specific order. Roland was silent for a moment. Then he said, What do you want me to do? Not what should we do. What do you want me to do? Beatrice noticed the difference. Send Hugh to the stationer, quietly. Ask for records, not accusations. Roland inclined his head. Done. And do not confront Winifred again until we have something more than access. A pause. Then, with dry resignation, I believe I have demonstrated the value of that advice. Beatrice almost smiled. He moved toward the door. She followed him. At the threshold, he stopped. There was distance between them now, not the cold distance of the cancelled wedding. Something more difficult, earned uncertainty. Roland looked at her. I do not expect anger to disappear because I apologized. It will not. I suspected as much. He turned to go. Beatrice reached out. Her fingers touched the sleeve of his coat. Roland stilled. She did not take his hand. Not today. Anger is not the same as farewell, she said. His eyes met hers. Something vulnerable crossed his face before discipline returned. No, he said quietly. I am beginning to understand that too. She released his sleeve. Roland left with Alice. By evening, Hugh returned to Brackenmere House with a copied account from the stationer. The bell watermarked cream paper had been ordered 6 weeks earlier. Cut to a non-standard width, delivered not to the Duke's study, not to the household office, but specifically to Lady Winifred Marlowe's private correspondence room. It proved access. It proved opportunity. It did not prove whose hand had written the lies. For that, they still needed one human truth Winifred could not explain away. The unused wedding breakfast room looked different without flowers. On the morning of the cancelled ceremony, the long table had been set with silver, porcelain, and enough white roses to persuade 20 people that a marriage founded on misunderstanding was an occasion for celebration. Now the table was bare. Roland had chosen the room deliberately. Beatrice understood why the moment she entered. Lady Alice stood near the hearth with Reverend Thomas Bell. Hugh Fenner waited beside a narrow escritoire containing the necessary papers. Beatrice's elder brother, the Earl of Locksley, had taken the chair nearest the windows and looked deeply uncomfortable, with a gathering he could neither control nor escape. 2 other witnesses had been invited because both had received copies of the accusation against Beatrice. No one else. No audience assembled merely to gasp. No ballroom. No spectacle larger than the truth required. Lady Winifred Marlowe entered last. She looked at the empty room and then at Roland. You have always had an instinct for unnecessary drama. Roland's expression did not change. I learned from family. Beatrice almost looked at him. Almost. Winifred took her place without being asked. What precisely am I accused of? Roland did not answer first. He looked at Beatrice. That small act steadied her more than she expected. She stepped toward the table. Before anyone is accused, she said, I want the facts stated plainly. Hugh placed the first document before them, the forged altar letter. Roland spoke. Lady Beatrice received this under my name. I did not write it. Hugh opened the household register. There is no record of His Grace dictating or dispatching such a letter. Winifred's gaze did not move. Registers can be incomplete. They can, Beatrice said. Which is why this proves only that the letter did not follow the Duke's recorded correspondence. Winifred looked at her then. Beatrice continued. The second fact is stronger. She removed the genuine letter Roland had written, and that she had kept in her own possession since opening it. The seal was broken now. The writing was unmistakably his. This letter was entered in the register as dispatched 6 weeks before the wedding. I never received it. Hugh placed the dark green portfolio beside it. It was found unopened among materials Lady Winifred removed from the household correspondence rooms after the ceremony was stopped. Winifred's mouth tightened. I managed wedding arrangements. Papers were constantly moved. Roland said nothing. Beatrice noticed. He had promised her the room. He was keeping the promise. Hugh produced the stationer's copied account. The false altar letter was written on cream paper, carrying a small bell watermark. The stationer confirms that this stock, cut to an unusual width, was ordered and delivered to Lady Winifred's private correspondence room. Winifred looked at Roland. "So this is your case? I owned paper." "No," Beatrice said. Winifred turned back to her. Beatrice kept her voice calm. "This is not a trial. Then what is it?" "A question." Something shifted in Winifred's face. Beatrice stepped closer to the table. "Why was his genuine letter in your portfolio?" Silence. Winifred glanced toward the others. "My dear, you cannot possibly expect me to remember every sheet of paper that passed through my hands. I expect you to remember intercepting a letter from a duke to the woman he was preparing to marry." The Earl of Locksley shifted in his chair. Winifred's expression hardened. I was attempting to prevent unnecessary confusion. Beatrice felt the room become still. What confusion? You and Roland had both agreed to the match. Under false impressions. You would have agreed eventually. Beatrice stared at her. Winifred exhaled sharply. "Oh, do not look so wounded. Neither of you was suited to managing the matter yourselves." Roland's jaw tightened. He still did not interrupt. Winifred continued. Roland distrusted every emotional demand placed upon him. You, Lady Beatrice, had spent years cultivating independence while pretending to be useful and accommodating. Left alone, you would have questioned one another until the arrangement collapsed. Beatrice heard Alice inhale. "So you changed the letters." I corrected them. There it was, not confession forced by paper, not a clever trap. Her own belief spoken aloud. Beatrice asked. "You removed what you considered inconvenient. I made each of you understandable to the other. You made each of us easier to manage." Winifred's eyes flashed. "I made a marriage possible." "No." Beatrice's voice remained quiet. "You arranged two strangers' consent to people who did not exist." The words settled over the empty wedding table. Winifred looked toward Roland. "I acted for your house," Roland finally spoke. "No, you acted to preserve your authority within it." For the first time, Winifred looked shaken. Roland moved to the end of the table. "You will retain your jointure. Your own income and residence remain untouched." Winifred's chin rose. "How generous." "This is not generosity. It is yours." His voice hardened. "But you will no longer supervise Brackenmere correspondence, household patronage, invitation lists, charitable distributions, or any administrative matter conducted in my name." Color left her face. "Roland, you used those powers to control information. I kept this family functioning. You kept it obedient." Winifred looked around the room. No one came to her defense. The consequence was not poverty. It was worse for a woman who had built her identity around invisible control. Irrelevance. Roland turned toward the witnesses who had received the accusation against Beatrice. "The statements circulated concerning Lady Beatrice's supposed fabrication of my interest were false. You may repeat that conclusion as freely as the accusation was repeated." Beatrice looked at him. He was not claiming her, not rescuing her with marriage, only restoring a fact. Then Roland did something she had not expected. He faced the room fully. "I must also account for my own conduct." Winifred stared at him. Roland continued. "When I believed further evidence might be destroyed, I acted without consulting Lady Beatrice. I warned Lady Winifred too early, weakened our position, and allowed another rumor to attach itself to Lady Beatrice's name. Beatrice felt something tighten in her chest. "My rank gave me authority over my household," Roland said. It did not give me authority over Lady Beatrice's voice. No one spoke. He did not look at Beatrice while saying it. That made it more honest. The matter ended quietly. Reverend Bell departed first. The two social witnesses followed. Beatrice's brother paused long enough to squeeze her hand with awkward affection before leaving with Alice and Hugh. Winifred did not speak to Beatrice when she went. Soon the room was empty except for Beatrice and Roland. The silence felt different now. No mystery waiting beneath it. No strategy. Roland stood beside the bare table. "I have no proposal to make." Beatrice almost smiled. "That is an unusual opening. I thought clarity had become fashionable. It suits you better than management." He accepted the rebuke. "I meant what I said." "I know. I am sorry. I know that too." Roland looked at her. He did not move closer. Beatrice did. One step, then another. The tension in his face changed when she reached him. She placed her hands lightly against his coat. Roland waited. Beatrice leaned into him. Only then did his arms come around her. The embrace was careful at first. Then she settled against him, and his hold deepened just enough to become honest. Beatrice closed her eyes. For a few quiet seconds, there was no duke, no scandal, no correspondence, only relief. When she drew back, Roland did not release her completely. His hand rested lightly at her waist. "Beatrice." "Yes," his voice was lower now. "May I kiss you?" She looked at him, at the man she had nearly married without knowing, at the man she now knew well enough to refuse, and well enough to choose. "Yes." Roland kissed her gently. No urgency, no triumph. When he lifted his head, Beatrice remained close. Neither of them spoke. For once, nothing had been written for them in advance. 6 weeks later, Beatrice received a letter that required no investigation. It arrived at Locksley House through the ordinary post, sealed with Roland's familiar crest and entered openly in the Brackenmere household register. Hugh Fenner had not needed to verify it. Lady Alice had not needed to witness its delivery. No one had intercepted, amended, summarized, or improved a single word. Beatrice knew that before she broke the seal, the knowledge itself felt like a luxury. Their courtship had been conducted with almost comical transparency. Roland called when he said he would call. If he wished to ask her something, he asked her. If Beatrice disagreed, she told him. Lady Alice occasionally declared that observing them converse was like watching two competent people discover the inconvenience of affection. Beatrice had learned that Roland's humor sharpened when he was nervous. Roland had learned that Beatrice became quieter, not louder, when something mattered deeply. Neither discovery had been supplied by anyone else. The letter in her hand was brief. He asked whether she would accompany her brother and Lady Alice to Aldercombe Park for several days. No proposal was mentioned. No promise was implied. Near the end, however, Roland had written one line that made Beatrice pause. "I should like you to see the place as it is before anyone asks what you might make of it." She folded the letter carefully. Then she smiled. Aldercombe Park lay in Hampshire, its broad stone house overlooking fields already deepening toward summer green. Roland did not greet Beatrice as though displaying an estate to a prospective duchess. That mattered. He showed her the library first, because he knew she liked rooms where people had been allowed to leave thoughts behind. He showed her the school accounts, because she had once challenged him over whether a duchess should know such things. He showed her correspondence from 2 tenant families and asked what she thought of a proposed change to winter fuel allowances. Beatrice read the relevant pages. "You already know what I think. I suspect what you think. Is that progress? Considerable. 6 weeks ago, I would have arranged to know on your behalf." She looked at him. That was almost funny. "I am improving at dangerous speed." They were alone, only in the limited sense propriety allowed. Lady Alice sat at the far end of the library, beside an open book, near enough to satisfy convention and experienced enough not to pretend she could not hear them. Beatrice returned the papers. "If you disagree with me, I will tell you, and if I disagree with you, I have reluctantly accepted that this is inevitable." She smiled. Roland reached into the inner pocket of his coat. "I also owe you something." Beatrice recognized the white linen before he fully unfolded it. Her mother's handkerchief. The small blue cornflower at one corner had been pressed flat. The linen was clean and carefully folded. "You kept it a very long time." "Yes." "Did the ink prove difficult?" "No." "Then why?" Roland looked at the handkerchief, and for once no dry answer came immediately. "When you gave this to me, you did not have to." Beatrice said nothing. "You had every reason to remain guarded," he continued. "You were angry with half of London and suspicious of the other half, yet you handed me something that mattered to you because my fingers were stained with ink. That sounds less romantic when stated so exactly. I have been accused of exactness." Repeatedly, his mouth curved. Then he looked at her with an openness that had not existed at the altar. "I nearly kept it." Beatrice's heart shifted. Roland continued before she could answer. "Not because I believed I had any right to it, because receiving something freely from you mattered more than I expected." Beatrice took the handkerchief from his hand. Their fingers touched deliberately this time. No surprise, no retreat. She folded the linen once. "You may ask for it another day." Roland went very still. Lady Alice turned a page with suspicious concentration. Beatrice placed the handkerchief beside the letter he had written her that morning. Genuine words. Her choice to keep both. Roland said, "Beatrice." She looked at him. There was no audience worth impressing, no scandal left to repair. Lady Winifred had retired to her own residence with her jointure intact and her Brackenmere authority gone. The copied accusations had been answered. The witnesses who had repeated them had repeated the correction. Hugh had secured the remaining correspondence. No hidden packet had produced another secret capable of changing the truth. Nothing forced this moment forward. That was why Beatrice trusted it. Roland stepped closer. "I have spent several weeks trying not to say this before I was certain you had space to refuse it. That sounds exhausting. It has been intolerable." She laughed softly. Then his expression changed. "I love you, Beatrice." The words were quiet, clear. "I do not love the woman I was told I ought to marry. I do not love the woman someone invented because she seemed convenient." He took a breath. "I love you, the woman who kept correcting me until I learned to listen." Warmth rose behind Beatrice's eyes, Roland added, with the faintest return of his dry wit. "Though I admit the genuine article is considerably more argumentative." Beatrice stepped toward him. "I love you too, Your Grace." He did not move. She smiled, in spite of the same defect. Then Beatrice kissed him, briefly, freely. Roland's surprise lasted only a moment before he answered the kiss with the same careful warmth he had shown the first time he held her. When they parted, his forehead nearly touched hers. "I had prepared a question. I suspected you might. Would you allow me to ask it before improving upon the answer myself?" That would demonstrate remarkable growth. Roland took her hand, not tightly, not as possession. "Will you marry me?" Beatrice looked at the man before her. Not the Duke described in altered letters, not the husband arranged by households. Roland. Yes, his fingers tightened around hers only after she answered. The second wedding was smaller than the first had been intended to be. That suited them. The private chapel at Aldercombe Park held family, a handful of witnesses, and no one who required spectacle. Reverend Bell officiated. Lady Alice cried and denied it afterward. Beatrice stood at the altar with no forged letter in her reticule. Her mother's handkerchief rested beside a genuine letter Roland had written to her the previous evening. It contained no instructions, no expectations disguised as tenderness, only truth. When the ceremony ended and they stepped from the chapel, Roland leaned closer. Am I what you were promised? Beatrice looked at him. No, his brows rose. Fortunately, he laughed. At the threshold of Aldercombe Park, Roland offered his hand. Beatrice looked once at the linen handkerchief and the genuine letter resting together among her things. One had steadied her when other people had spoken over her. The other existed because at last no one had. She placed her hand in Roland's. Together, they crossed the threshold. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.